and we'll get started here shortly. Appreciate everybody for being here today. I'm going to take a quick point of personal privilege for broadcasting purposes. Today's my mom's birthday, so Mom, if you're watching, happy 58th. Well, she probably won't be happy that I said her age, but but happy birthday. But yes, thank you all so much for being here. We called this meeting so that we can get an update from the mayor's office on the working group for boards and commissions and their progress. So we've got a presentation here today. We have the Honorable Dave Rosenberg from the mayor's office presenting here for us. So without further ado, Mr. Rosenberg, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you all hear me okay? I've never sat in this particular seat. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks, y'all, for being here. I know you've got a lot of competing priorities. It can be difficult. Metro government is, in so many ways, a volunteer-run government. 70, 80-ish boards and commissions with about 800 mostly local residents serving on them, run a lot of the functionality of our metro government. And it is very important that we ensure they have the tools and the structure to act as a foundation of support for the work they do for the people of Nashville, Davidson County. There are currently more than 82 boards, commissions, and other bodies, and they come from a variety of sources, which you can see here broken out. It's quite a wide range. There are a lot of distinctions among them, and some of these variations exist even on the same board, where a single board will have different term lengths for different members, and you see membership sizes ranging from 3 to 40, which is the Beautification Commission, and is that size for a specific reason. And then you see a lot of variations, including the ones that you see listed here, where the control over them and their origin lies, the powers and duties, whether they have a director and staff and how those are composed, who appoints members to the board, whether there are specific qualifications for those members, what kind of autonomy they have in their operations, whether they're responding to another department or acting on their own, and what additional guidance has been given to them. So with that in mind, we have to acknowledge that a lot of these boards and commissions were either created 60 years ago and not touched since then, some modified piecemeal since then, and others that were compromises reflecting the politics of the moment. And operationally, many of them have lacked the support that they deserve ever since their origin. So the mayor asked for an effort to strengthen boards and commissions in the areas of structure, operations, support, and transparency. The mayor has teams working on a variety of important issues in Metro, and boards and commissions certainly rise to that level. So when we discuss the optimal arrangements for a board or commission, there are a lot of factors to consider. How many members should be on the board? What should their length of their terms be? What attendance standards might be appropriate? What ex officios should be on the board? How should member terms be staggered? Is the membership composition consistent with the charter? What backgrounds should members be required to have? How can we support members? How can we support the departments that interact with them? What standards should be set for posting meeting info on the websites? Are meetings set for the right times and locations? And do the bylaws reflect best practices, comply with the charter, and put the board in the best position to succeed? The answers to these questions are different for every one of these boards. So the work that has already been done as part of this effort includes a survey that was sent to every member with a valid email address. It was sent multiple times. Response rates varied widely. Frankly, some of the questions we asked were valuable, some of them not so much, and others just not included and should be looked to again in the future. In the fall, Councilmember Sepulveda sponsored legislation which Council passed that made various changes, which I'll get into on the next slide. And we also developed recommendations for criteria for council member participation on board as a member of a board and commission at the council's request. More on that later too. And we've also done a first round of surveys of some boards and commissions staff to understand their needs. The past legislation passed by council hit in four main areas. Council has passed 10 pieces of legislation this term impacting the code sections for boards and commissions. This was, I believe, the 8th or 9th one, and it was BL 2024-582. And it did four things. It aligned council member participation with the charter. Over time, some members had been added as voting members, which is not allowed under our founding document, so that was modified to make them non-voting members. We terminated some closed bodies, zombie bodies. These were bodies that were created generally by resolution or ordinance for the purpose of putting together a report. They put out the report, but there was no mechanism in the original legislation that actually dissolved the body once it no longer did work. Term clustering. Over the years, terms, if you've looked at board and commission legislation and code, often a board is set with, say, 7 members, and it's 4-year terms, except the first terms are a combination of 1, 2, and 3 years to ensure the entire board or commission isn't turning over at the same time. Over time, when appointments were not happening exactly at the end of the term, for example, if there were several months of vacancy, that would shift the beginning and end of the term, and eventually you end up with a lot of the board doing what was intended to be avoided at the beginning. One of the boards in this latest piece of legislation is a particularly acute example of that. What this last piece of legislation did was stop making it worse by saying no matter when a confirmation occurs, the new member's term ends the appropriate period after the previous holder of the seat's term ended. So a 4-year term might end up being 3 years and 10 months because it was made 2 months late rather than shifting that and seeing that worse. So you stop that from getting any worse. And lastly, attendance requirements. Some of the issues that we see either around, it can affect quorum on boards and commissions, but also it's taking a slot and depriving the board or commission of a voice when there are members that are chronically absent. This created a mechanism for council to consider whether to remove a member that meets certain criteria and are considered chronically absent. It was important for it to come to council for consideration. First of all, it has to by virtue of the charter, but second of all, sometimes there are extenuating circumstances that somebody has to deal with in their personal life, and by the time it would get here, they're ready to go back and be an important voice on that body. With respect to the council member participation criteria, during a council committee last fall, the conversation turned to when it feels right for a council member to serve on a board or commission. There are limitations under the charter, of course, in that, unless it's enabled by, as you see in the left column here, it's enabled by the charter, or there's a state and federal law that provides for a local legislator to be on the body. The charter doesn't allow it, and that's interpreted as meaning a voting member versus a non-voting member. So we got into the conversation about what the criteria might look like absent that initial provision, and we were asked to present some recommendations for council consideration. These are recommendations we're giving to you. It's on a piece of paper on your desk, or if you came in late, there are some handouts over there. And these are criteria or recommendations for you to do with as you see fit. You can codify it, you can put it in the rules, you can crumple it up, throw it in the recycling bin, you can modify it. We are presenting this to you at your request for you to consider. So where we landed is that it might be worthwhile to consider whether or not to add a council member in a non-voting capacity if it's a board that's advisory in nature versus making policy, where the primary work of the body is to consider district-specific projects. Think the STR board, where things are coming, might need the voice of who'll be responsive to district council member, and when there's a point in time need for a member as a result of some sort of situation happening at that moment. We added that when addressing a point in time need, it is important to use caution with respect to budgets and conflicts. That's taking into account the fact that if it is a direct allocation to a board or commission, a council member on that board might have an outsized voice over the other board and commission members, and then might also advocate in an outsized way among council for that board and commission. Always important to advocate for what's valuable to you, but something to consider, and then any specific conflicts that might exist. We thought it would be important to consider the impact of pending legislation, specifically the lawsuits still in motion regarding the size of the Metro Council. There are nearly 30 council positions on boards and commissions as it stands today. And if we do lose and the council can no longer be 40 members, that's going to increase the burden on council members who are already going to see their burden increased substantially. The third would be to sunset the inclusion. If this is a point in time need, then that point in time is going to expire, and consider sunsetting the inclusion in 24 months or less. You can always re-up it at that time. And lastly, to allow any council member to serve and ensure that the entire council's voice can be represented. Again, these are simply recommendations, and it's all yours. Now, the work that is not complete, but that has been sent to council and that we are continuing to collaborate on. We had a couple of commissions where the recommended changes were numerous enough that they needed to stand alone. The first is the Stormwater Management Commission bill. You passed it as amended on second reading last night. That originated with Metro Water in an effort to ensure wider representation on the commission and also to make technical corrections. Specifically, there's an outdated name of the commission throughout the code section. The second is the Entertainment Commission legislation that I know y'all are intimately familiar with. That's in a holding pattern at the moment, but will be a necessary step towards getting that commission and an executive director. And third is our next piece of legislation, which you passed on first reading last night. So let's get into that. First of all, the process that underwent was first identifying specific categories that to consider in structural changes. identify the opportunities through survey and research, make the recommendations to the mayor, allow the administration to consider that legislation, and then file it for council consideration, which is where we are today. Throughout the process, this was a big part of it was collecting input from those who work closest with boards and commissions, like their executive directors. The structural changes that are recommended are in 6 areas. The first is membership size. By looking at the average sizes of boards and commissions here and elsewhere, we found that 7 to 9 is the most prevalent, either as a mean or median. We then widened that range upward for flexibility to 11 and asked those who work with code-established boards and commissions with unusually small or large boards to share their thoughts on whether there would be a downside to resizing, and if not, what that number would be. And we got a variety of responses and honored each one of those. The second was appointing authority, and this was simply if a board or commission was going to change size, what's the equitable way of distributing that change? The third was member qualifications. We asked those who know the boards best whether they feel like the membership qualifications written into a code, for example, being an attorney or an expert in another field, are serving them well. The fourth was term clustering, talked about a little bit before. This then goes and makes corrections to some of the ones that were most egregious, mostly where half a board could be turning over at a single time, in some cases an entire board. Again, we asked whether making such a change would be helpful to those boards and commissions, and the ones included in the legislation said yes. I believe it is the beer board that might have everybody turning over at once. I know MHRC has every mayoral appointment at the same time and all besides one council election at the same time, or close to it. Next were quorum requirements. There are only 2 of these. One is a request from MHRC to address an onerous and unique quorum requirement, and this removes that from code. And the other is just modifying the wastewater hearing authority quorum to reflect its change in membership size. And lastly, the body name. This is 1, and it's the Sexually Oriented Business Licensing Board, which is a board we've historically found challenging to fill, not because of the workload or the subject matter, but simply because of the name. So we've worked to identify a name that will accurately identify it in a different way, and that is the Board of Licensing for Adult Entertainment and Safety. Here is a list of bodies that are a part of this legislation. Arts, BPAC, Beer Board, CATV Special Committee, Contracting Compliance Board, MHRC, Property Standards, the currently Sexually Oriented Business, STR Board, the SAC, Tourism, and Wastewater. And here's a graphic I challenge everyone to follow that connects the board and commission with their subject matter. There's a list on your desk or in your packet that just lists them consecutively. I'm glad to share that electronically, so it's useful. But this was an opportunity just to see how many were touching each board and commission, how many were touching each subject area. Beg your pardon? For you. And then the work ahead. There's a lot ahead that's very separate from the work we've been doing so far, which has been mostly around structure, although we've been collecting plenty of topics to discuss in these other areas. Generally, they fall into these 3 areas. Best practices for boards, that includes things like operating practices and bylaws, as well as transparency, which encompasses things like video coverage, posting of agendas, posting of minutes, the content of the minutes that are posted, and other materials being available. It also will align with the timing and location of boards and commissions to make them as accessible as possible, both for the boards and for interested parties. as well as MNN. Next up would be best practices for members. This includes new member training, additional support materials, and identifying the roles of various board members and officers. That first piece, the training materials, was helped in a really great way by a booklet that Metro Legal put out and distributed as part of the Arts MHRC conciliation agreement. We'll need to work to make sure that that continues to get to new board and commission members, that any updates happen that need to happen, and find a good avenue for providing this kind of information to board and commission members before they even come before you for consideration. And then this third category is a catch-all. Code updates could reflect the way that some bodies are already working, charter recommendations to mirror some things that you approve at the code level, and then whatever other items come up that will help enhance the work. A lot of hours, a lot of thought, a lot of really thoughtful individuals, including some council members, have been and will remain necessary to take these often ignored but critical parts of our metro government, take a fresh look at them free from old political fights or old realities, and ensure that they have the greatest opportunity to succeed moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions either now or moving forward. Anybody who's not able to be here and looks back at this, please never hesitate to reach out. And I'd love to be helpful in whatever way possible, including your thoughts and things that we should be looking at or that you'd like to be a part of moving forward.
Thank you so much. The first question that I initially have is, as far as alterations to the charter and recommendations, knowing that we'll have an opportunity to have ballots for a charter amendment in 2026. When do you anticipate providing specific recommendations that would go to the Charter Revision Committee?
Chair, we'd like to have those to you in whatever time period the chair of the committee would like. We want to have them in plenty of time to consider not only which ones are worth discussing and then moving forward with, but also which ones can be packaged with something else and which are the types of things that should stand alone.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the committee or anybody here? Okay, I see you, Vice Chair Cash. Whose seat are you? Okay, you're recognized, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to ask about, if you could go back to that slide, the three things like the work ahead. Yeah, and I guess this, I don't know if this relates to operations, it relates to transparency, but it's like as they're coming to us and we have, you know, the packet that we get about the nominees that they fill out almost always. And there are questions about conflicts of interest and just making sure that there's no, like, there are conflicts of interest that might mean there are some votes that they can't take, but there are also, like, as we saw with something recently, like a couple of people were eliminated because they worked for Metro. And I kind of am more asking about the former, but I feel like we could tighten up on that about, like I've seen where where in the discussion and the questioning, we learned that there are conflicts of interest that mean that there might be times when they can't take a vote on something. But on the form itself, it says NA or not applicable or something that indicates no conflict of interest. And I think it would be best if we kind of were fully transparent about those conflicts of interest and I guess the vetting team, whether it be, you know, the mayor's office or a council person, just like make our best effort to disclose those rather than it just come up in questioning, if that makes sense. And I think vast majority of the time it's coming up, but it makes me nervous to see not applicable. And then when it comes out in questioning, like how I want us to be able to rely on the information in the questionnaire and think it's better if it's out front, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I agree. Do you think that is that solved with more specific wording in the question, you think? Councilmember Allen says
I
yes.
guess so, and maybe if there's vetting ahead of time, I don't know exactly what that looks like on y'all's end, and I know that there are typically a lot, and you're going through a lot of people. But so I don't know, and I'm willing to be a part of a conversation that works out how we might be able to do that. But I just want us to be fully transparent and be able to, for us on the committee, to be able to vote, knowing if there's any conflict of interest or, you know, something that is going to come up frequently with votes or, and yeah.
Thank you. I agree. And I'd love to kind of brainstorm some ideas about things that we could ask or different mechanics for this to ensure that that's the case and there are no surprises.
Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and this has been a great explanation of sort of the process that you went through, so that's very helpful. Would it be possible to get a little more detail on the response rate on the survey of the boards and commissions? Was it 70%, 20%?
I believe it was in the neighborhood, it was 200 something responses. Sorry, I need to look back. I think that we had about probably 600 email addresses. I'm sure some of them were invalid. So probably ended up with about a third. And you'd see, I feel like some of the newer advisory committees, you'd get several responses. And then some of the others, you'd get just one or two.
Okay.
So it really depended.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Absolutely.
And then I guess, are you still in the process of going through the staff survey results? I think that's a great viewpoint to get. So I'm glad to hear you did that.
Yeah, we did it for the, do you mind if I just respond? Okay, thanks. We sent the survey to the folks that are working with code-created boards, a specific subset of them that we knew that we would be able to get into structure on. Kind of learned from the first questionnaire that it's a good idea to do a trial run and figure out what we wish we'd asked before doing the larger version. We got responses, not from all of them, had to reach out individually, just ask questions of some others.
So that's still
but it informed this legislation. Well, yeah, I mean, I think we got the answers we need for anything that could be done structurally with respect to legislation, but when it comes to nailing down the way agendas, minutes, meeting scheduling, and when I say agendas and minutes, it's not just posting it on the website, but also when they're getting it to members, whether it's whether packets are also being sent in advance or just being put on desks, that kind of thing. There's still a lot more to do there.
Okay, that's important stuff. And then I want to circle back to Councilmember Cash's question about the conflict of interest. I know there's a balance there between having people who have expertise when that is helpful to decisions that they need to make. And because they have expertise, that may mean that there are times when they're actively engaged in something, and in that case, they have to recuse themselves. I mean, I can think specifically on the Planning Commission. You know, there are folks who kind of, you know, once every meeting, there's one thing that comes up and they have to recuse themselves. So I just would say, as we try to think through how that question is further refined, because I think there is value to doing that we do it in a thoughtful way so that it doesn't make people go, oh, conflict of interest, forget them. You know, so, you know, is there a way to say, can you describe situations where you might have to recuse yourself, and how frequently do you think that would be, or something? I don't know. It just seems like people need to appreciate that the expertise is useful, but if they can't vote on anything, that's not useful. But every so often.
That's a great idea, and it might be also, you know, kind of a statement, basically what you said right beforehand. You know, subject matter expertise is important. This isn't going to disqualify you, but it's important.
Right. Yeah. And people care about the conflict of interest piece as well. So I think that's important. And then my final question is, there are, based on the way I've looked at the information, and hopefully it's correct, there are still a number of other large commissions that have not been included yet. Is there a second wave coming, or were the responses from some of the committees, we need to be this big because of the diversity that it offers? Or can you speak to who made the list and who didn't?
Yeah, I'll name some.
Children's Memory Garden, the Community Review Board, the Community Partnership Safety Fund, HIV Group, the Greenways, Historic Commission, Major Events, Sports Authority.
Some of those were not code created, and we don't have a say-so over. Historical Commission, frankly, it just did not seem like the time to make anybody feel like we were trying to do anything there. MHRC is in the legislation. They said they would be comfortable going from 17 to 15. That would preserve the diversity they want and also be operationally healthy. So that's one that's staying outside. Beautification Commission is one from every district, of course, so that makes sense. There's the continuum of care, which is going through a process and is federally dictated in some ways. Just get my list here of continuum of care. There's another one that's inactive, BPAC's in there.
There was an HIV one.
That is an executive order one, which will handle those separately because those have to be completely reissued, which involves changing some references in various places and administrative issue we'll need to deal with.
So at this point, do you expect just a small number of specific ones to be handled on a one-by-one basis, or?
Perhaps, and then there's MAC, which is in a transitionary period right now, but is one that we would look at. That one, I believe the restrictions just that it needs to be a multiple of 3. Entertainment Commission, of course, isn't in here. And then it's more state-created bodies. And then on the small side, they either identified the reasoning for the size, or there are a couple that are charter created, and then the rest of them are being increased, or state created, and the rest are being increased.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you for just sort of putting that in the context of all the ones that are out there. A lot of boards to look at, so I appreciate that.
There are. I did not, on council, had a lot of these things coming, but it was not something that I didn't recognize quite how differently every board and commission was operating, and how it connected to their mission. And it's been it's a really large project, but a worthwhile one, and one we're really trying to look thoughtfully at every board or commission and not paint anything with a broad brush. Thank you.
Councilmember Rutherford.
Thank you, Chair, and I too appreciate all of the work that has gone into this. You mentioned or referenced the council reduction litigation that's ongoing. If we actually end up going in that direction and have a reduced council, that wouldn't actually be in place until after the next election cycle. And of course, council members who serve on boards and commissions, their terms end with the term of office. So what are some of the factors and considerations for us to be thinking about in terms of how a reduced or a potential reduced council would be impacted?
With respect to council members being on boards and commissions?
Yes.
I think it's just that even though the term doesn't survive the term on the board or commission doesn't survive the change of term in council, the legislation creating that position and the need to fill it does survive. So if that number is going to go up, it's worth being mindful of. Hopefully that is not a factor in the near future anymore and isn't a consideration at all, but it's something worth factoring in. And of course, if we do create it, can always go back and take it back out, since, like you said, the members wouldn't be surviving the term change anyway on that board. So,
with some being created legislatively, and is that something that we would need to address in this term to set up the next term, or is that something we would need to maybe consider in our charter considerations?
But if it's made and it's bad, would they need to change the legislation this term to remove members from boards or commissions, or could they do it after the term change? You could, sorry.
I think I understand the question that you've asked about whether or not the idea of, or the legislation that puts council members on boards and commissions would need to be amended or repealed if the litigation is decided in a manner that results in the reduction of the size of the council. And whether that would happen this term or the subsequent term when there could be a reduced council size. I think it would be up to the body. I think it's a decision that would need to be made after all of the work that's going to have to be done if there is to be a reduction in the size of the council. And I would recommend that those decisions be made after that fact to see kind of where we are. But the simple answer is you could do it this term or you could do it next term.
Okay, so if I'm reading you right, then it wouldn't matter then whether this particular council that is seated makes that decision or punts to the next term.
I do not think no, I don't think that would need to necessarily be a consideration if determining whether to remove council members from boards and commissions. I think that was your initial question, is whether they would need to be removed.
Not removed currently, but I'm talking about more or less going forward into the next term.
Yeah.
When would decisions need to be made and in what matter, essentially?
Well, since the legislation put them on the board or commission, legislation would be needed to repeal that particular or remove that particular position from a board or commission. But whether it's made this term to be effective, after the legislation is passed, or whether it's made by the subsequent term is, I can think of pluses and minuses for both actions, so both timeframes.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, I have one additional question, a completely different topic. Of the surveys that were conducted of the sitting board and commission members, were council members who serve on those boards and commissions part of that survey?
No, nobody with a .gov address was part of that survey.
Thank you.
And then Councilmember Weiner, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate it. Dave, what a great job. This is a load to have to lift, and all the work that you and everybody's done has been great. Excuse me, been great. Three things. You don't know what you don't know about upcoming legislation or proposals that are presented to different boards and commissions. And I think in light of the conflict of interest topic, when you're establishing the criteria for exclusion, you might want to consider just specifying that if there is something that's brought before the board or commission, and if you stand to recognize or realize any personal benefit that rises to the level of some sort of conflict, and you probably should recuse yourself. Similar to what we do, similar to us having to present the things that we are invested in. I think that if we look at it maybe more on a case-by-case topical basis, it might be an easier lift than if we just say, no, you can't serve. So that was just one example. Also, I know we talked about, and Berkeley took part of my questions, but that was a good thing. The minutes being posted and minutes being taken, my hope is that that's being addressed and corrected across the board.
Would very much like to, yes.
Great. And yeah, I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chair Evans, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask about the MHRC reconciliation file, and is that something that we can get a copy of in rules or the whole council? Because I feel like I don't know what people are being told, and that would be helpful, I think, as we kind of carry forward. And then also kind of like piggybacking on what Councilmember Weiner was talking about related to the minutes question. I agree. And I think that we've had a lot of disparities and challenges around recordings and things like that. And then when things get sideways and we record, and then it's like we've got a lot of transparency. But if there's alternatives to even recording, like AI tools or anything that could take transcription of minutes or anything like that, that would be a low barrier to entry for IT or something, I think that would be helpful if that could be a consideration. Because I know we can't really add, a ton of equipment and IT resources and create new spaces for people to be able to go to have their meetings. And then on the, I think the presentation was very helpful. I don't know, like this was a huge endeavor, obviously. And I know it's been going on for a while since we first started talking about like the makeup of boards and commission members and like who are we attracting and are we getting the right representation in Davidson County and everything. Because I feel like part of our conflict, I guess, kind of on the floor has been around like who moved my cheese and like we're making all these changes and not having, I think some of this context is helpful. And so hopefully people will go back and watch this meeting to be able to hear the conversation around the presentation and kind of all the conflicts, that are arising across how everything is documented. Because I think it's really worthwhile to hear that. And kind of related to that, on the transparency side, I had made comments in previous rules meetings about transparency and like essentially like who's pulling the puppet strings kind of behind the scenes about, having all these conversations. And of course you shared like, here's all the people that are representing council and everybody else, kind of behind the scenes on the project. And so I guess, can you help me understand, like, is there a reason why they couldn't just be like an open meeting? Are you speaking about board conflicts and things like that would be sensitive to people? I guess I don't fully understand because like this is helpful, provides a lot of context. And as we go down this path, if people had more of an opportunity to show up in person and hear like, what is the conversation? Like I take a lot of time to digest information. I don't know about others. But that kind of thing would be helpful to know. And so can you illuminate that a little bit?
Sure. First of all, yes, we can get the conciliation doc shared. It's a public document and is attached to the conciliation agreement, but it is just helpful to have as a PDF. Had a really good meeting this morning discussing non-resource intensive ways that might be used to increase MNN's capacity. They're stretched really thin, but I think that there are some opportunities there to even beyond increased staff and equipment and that sort of thing. I think there are solutions on that front. We're a group advising the mayor on things. He's got a bunch of them. There's housing and infrastructure. Some involve a council member like this one and the UI, UX one about the website, the pallet shelter group that you're a part of. And those are sometimes ad hoc, sometimes, we're not waiting for eminent availability. They're all virtual. It's something that we can do and just have frank conversations and throw out ideas and have constructive conversations. And then when it rises to the level of something that would come before council, like legislation, it travels the same route as other administration that comes from either the mayor's office or another department. So we've provided extra visibility into it because I think it's important, and this is something about the operation of government that I think everyone should be interested in, and happy to come present on it anytime or send more frequent updates. I love the invitation, and I enjoy talking about topics I'm passionate about and not talking about topics I'm not passionate about. So I welcome the invitation, but just generally, groups of people advising the mayor on things aren't televised or anything.
No, and I understand about televised. I just meant open just in general, where it's, Clay could walk in there and listen if he wanted to, but I understand where you're coming from. I think and kind of to that point, like thinking about the pallet shelter working group, since that's one I obviously have a lot of familiarity with, I felt like, I guess with that, like the burden is on me to share feedback with anybody on the council who is asked, like obviously I mentioned the update, in yesterday's meeting, in public health and safety. And so is the burden on, obviously we've got council representation. So is the burden on the council member to communicate updates? Is the burden on the mayor's office to communicate updates? Like what is the vision on that? Because like I do, because I feel obligated, because I've just been working on it for a million years, it feels like. And so do you take that responsibility?
I do. I think that's on me, and I own the fact that I should have been doing more comprehensive and frequent updates throughout this process.
Okay. I think that's all that I had for now, and I appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? I'm going to go with Chair Cap. Oh, wait, hold on a second. There you go.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Rosering, for the presentation. This is really helpful, and I know we're grateful for the update. Just a question about if you have a timetable for the rest of your working group's work and when recommendations might be coming.
I think that they're going to continue to drip out mostly on the operational thing. I honestly think that I'm going to be stepping away from my grandkids to participate in this working group and on this effort.
No timetable.
I think there's a bottomless list of things that can be touched, and it's a kind of a matter of prioritizing the things that are either of greatest impact or of greatest interest to the council and members of the public, and going from there.
Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me go a second round. I just want to respond to the issue that came up about the conflict of interest. We did briefly in the last term consider requiring the all boards and commission nominees to fill out that full conflict of interest statement, or maybe it was just once I got elected, but I got very strong pushback from many people who said that was just a burden that was going to eliminate a lot of good potential board members. And I think I was writing and not fully listening, so that may not have been what was suggested, but certainly if we do something, it should be a much smaller version of what elected officials and government employees are required to do.
I agree. I think that's it would just be part of the questionnaire. And although that feels like years ago, that was earlier this term.
Council's aging us all rapidly. Yeah. Anything further from anybody? Mr. Rosenberg, anything else that you want to share with the committee?
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Please, anytime, if there's anything as far as substance or process, I'm always up for criticism or ideas in whatever form they take. So please give me a shout. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Of course. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to be here. Is there anything else that anybody wishes to share with the committee today? Seeing nothing, we will go ahead and adjourn. So thank you all so much for being here.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.